Our friend and colleague Dom Phillips, Bruno Pereira, had a real commitment to the environment, to Indigenous communities, the Amazon, and who died doing a job that was absolutely at the heart of who they were as human beings.
Police in Brazil are searching for the bodies of two men, a British journalist, Dom Phillips, and a Brazilian expert, Bruno Pereira.
On the 5th of June 2022, our friend and colleague Dom Phillips was returning from a 4-day reporting trip deep in the Brazilian Amazon. He was traveling with a Brazilian Indigenous expert called Bruno Pereira. And as they came back down the Itaquai River, they were ambushed by a group of men and murdered. The murders of Brazilian activists, Indigenous activists, environmentalists are unfortunately all too common here. But the murder of a foreign journalist reporting on such groups was really, really rare and very shocking for our community, many of whom were good friends with Dom. Dom had worked in Brazil for many years, about 15. And in the last 5 or so, before he was killed, had really dedicated himself to the Amazon. It was a region he loved. And he really also dedicated himself to trying to understand the many forces at work behind the destruction of the Amazon, and also what could be done to try and protect the region. Dom's mission was to be in these very remote regions, which very few other journalists were reporting on. He really died doing what he thought was important. Bruno was an Indigenous expert, dedicated his life to the Indigenous communities of the Javari Valley, and particularly to the isolated communities. I think 12 months on from the murders, there is good news and bad news. It was the first time I've been back to the Javari Valley since last year's search. The good news is that the Indigenous patrol teams, the young activists whose work Dom was reporting on and Bruno was involved in creating, they are going from strength to strength. It was great to see that despite all of the threats, despite the dangers, these guys are out there on the rivers, in the rainforests, to try and detect the invaders who are storming their lands, pillaging their forests, poaching fish from their rivers. They are not giving in. That was absolutely wonderful to see, and I'm sure that Dom would have been absolutely thrilled to see it had he still been with us. The bad news is that the threats that those groups are facing are still as real as ever. Land invasions continue, illegal fishing continues. There is so much still to be done. It is extremely urgent, and that is why Dom was there to report on exactly these themes. The world can realize that this is happening, grasp the urgency of it, and get involved in trying to help save these people's communities and their lives. Through that, help the world, because these communities are really at the heart of the climate emergency. If these Indigenous communities are not supported and able to protect their rainforests, then all of us will suffer.